Hi, angels. Welcome back to Everybody Hates LA, your go-to source for celebrating the soul of Los Angeles through hometown heroes and creative visionaries. LA 7 years ago, I've done a lot of research and have participated in more spiritual workshops than I can probably even remember. Became so obsessed with what was fated that I didn't always take the necessary precautions to audit my energy, meaning that I allowed other people to tell things and put them into my life without even really realizing if it was fitting or not. I think that we can sometimes become so numb to all of this because it's easier to tell yourself, oh, the universe will just make it happen or things will always just work out, that we don't always recognize the control that we have over our own life and over our own energy and stay accountable to all of that, right? I'm accountable to somebody in a corporation because I owe you a deliverable. I'm accountable to my clients because they're expecting something from me. I'm accountable to myself, right? With the food that I'm eating or when I go to the gym or the time that I'm spending somewhere. But I don't always connect the accountability with the energy that comes in there. And at the end of the day, auditing your energy is everything that matters. A few years ago, actually right before COVID, I went to San Francisco because I heard about this energy workshop and just wanted to learn more. And I ended up meeting a really wonderful human, Jill Payne, who flipped my entire world upside down to the point where all of the notes that I took on my phone that day, I still probably reference once a week or so. And it was all about energy management. Today's episode, Jill Payne joins us all the way from Canada to talk about her work, research, and the programs that she established to help transform individuals and corporations all over North America. Jill is a proud mom, speaker, coach, and author of Be a Dime. She spent her early days as a multi-sport athlete representing Canada in Sprint Canoe and Rugby, and my arms are already hurting, and has always been fascinated by the human potential. Her journey took her academic research all the way through science and employee engagement, and she spent the last 10 plus years learning and teaching how to harness the principle of energy management. In today's episode, Jill will walk us through her transformative framework to empower individuals and teams to create a culture of care, confidence, and boundless potential. By learning how to master the body, focus internal dialogue, Jill believes that any person can tap into their resilience, adaptability, and rise to any challenge. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. I'll see you on the other side. I went into my phone notes section and I looked at the notes that I took from when you and I first met during the WISE event in San Francisco right before the pandemic. Get shit done. Quote, unquote.
I still believe that. February 2020. That was February 2020.
Yes, it was the last trip that I took before the pandemic hit. And I know I've said this to you before, but I think had I not done at the time you called it the energy workshop, now capacity building, I don't think I would have managed the pandemic as well as I did, right? Because it's all about, I wrote here, you're not managing your emotions, you're managing energy, which then determines your mood and mental state. You have to be the right channel at the right time, not being a victim, but also holding yourself accountable. And then just a bunch of graphs about detail positive, detail negative. And I don't think any of that has changed with you.
You got it so clear, though. That's so great.
Oh, I remember being mesmerized by it. So thank you for joining us today. What is diming?
What is diming? So diming is being a 10 out of a 10. And being a 10 out of a 10, for me now, I would describe it as your most confident, your most curious, creative, connected, calm version of yourself. So I think sometimes when we say 10, you think you're going to be like caffeinated and energized, but it's really more of like you in your best state, in your most capable state. So it's but we know what a dime feels like. It's when you like think about someone and they call you and your energy's up and you want to do the things that are good for you, and following through with things is easy, and making connections is fun, and your work feels efficient and you find flow easily. I mean, that's to me what being a 10 is.
Yeah. When I think about being a 10 out of 10, I think about productivity, which isn't always the healthiest, right? But a lot of times when you're being a 10 or when you're being a dime, we think about it from the professional setting of how can I be the best worker? How can I be the best business owner? How can I show up as my best self? But there's so much more to it, right?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's all about productivity. And I also wouldn't say it's all about just being happy. right? So I think it's about just really living your life to the fullest, being the most satisfied, being the most content. I think it's a different feeling than, yeah, because I think sometimes we think caffeinated and energized and I get so much done and, but that's not a really balanced life.
Yeah.
There's probably other things that aren't working. And it's not about just being happy all the time, because you're probably not really looking at life if you're happy all the time. So it's not about that. I think everybody has a different definition. So for me, I always say, like, what's your definition of success? Like, someone who is successful, what are their characteristics? And if you realize what those are, that is your personal version of what a 10 out of a 10 is. So there may be times in your life where your definition of success is productivity, but it's not, you have to ask yourself. I think it's a really personal thing of, who am I when I'm a 10? Like, what is important to me when I'm at that level?
Yeah. And then also not making certain life decisions when you're not at that level, right? Or being even honest with yourself.
I talk to so many people about that right now. Like, they'll just be in a funk and they're like, oh, I think I want to change my business or do this, this, and this. And I'm like, hold on. Like, let's wait till we feel good. Let's wait till our energy's on the right channel. Cause like I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and they're like, oh, the way I set this up is not good. I need to change everything. And I'm like, you are not enjoying your life right now. Like, you are not at a 10. So let's get your energy up, and still you might make those changes to your business, but let's first get your energy up and then see how you feel about it.
What does that process look like? Because I imagine it's not an overnight thing.
No, I think there's a lot of people who have been kind of doing the same things for a long period of time, and that's affecting our energy, and we don't realize that something else is possible. So I think sometimes we're waiting for our external situations to change so we can actually start to feel better. But for me, how you manage your energy is what you do with your body, what you choose to focus on, and the dialogue you use with yourself. A fucking dime, right? So like, that's the thing that we need to remember. So my body is not necessarily sleeping, eating perfectly, working out, cold plunges, saunas, meditation. Like, it's not necessarily, those things will increase your energy, but I feel like the general population doesn't have the capacity to actually follow through with all of those things. So we try and we don't do it, and then we feel even worse about it. So for me, the body is about my nervous system. So my posture, my smiling, my breathing, my voice, my movement, but it's about, can I train my nervous system into a better feeling? So as soon as I sit up tall, I tell my whole nervous system, I'm capable. I'm confident. I fucking got this, right? As soon as I take a deep breath, I tell my body I'm safe. As soon as I smile, I tell my body good things are possible. As soon as I use my voice in a strong way, as soon as I move more of my body, I change the energy that I have, and the capacity that I feel is different, right? And then with our body, that's our body. So then with our focus, this is a quick overview of how you manage your energy or capacity. For me, they're the same thing. Focus is, am I thinking about the ideal situation or the worst case scenario? And then dialogue is, am I speaking to myself kindly? And am I on the same team as myself? So if you think about someone who's like, oh, my business is such a slog, like, they're probably sitting down all day. Their body is not in a calm, like, they're on Zoom all day.
Not getting sunlight.
Totally. Or sitting down, not moving, not breathing properly, right? And then they're focused on like all the stress and everything that could go wrong and everything they have to do that they're not excited about. And then the way they speak to themselves about, it's never going to change. I have to be like this, and probably there's probably people listening that are like, you just described every single day that I'm living, right? So I think there's a lot of that happening where we're not using our body in a powerful way. We're focusing on everything that could potentially go wrong or doesn't feel good. And then that's just like creating a loop of dialogue in our head constantly. This doesn't feel good. This isn't fun. I don't feel good. I can't change this. I'm stuck here, whatever. Right. So it's like, there's no way that we're going to feel good or energetic when we're managing those three things in that way.
Yeah. And I think you actually touched on this, which I have your book right here. And you segued us because page 64, you talk about the energy that you have, right? So one of the most important decisions you'll ever make is what to focus on. And that's a choice you make all day, every day. It's like everything that you do determines everything that you are, everything that happens, right? You can choose what you give your attention to, and it'll soon become second nature. And actually 2 months ago now, you and I chatted and I was going through it and I was like, you know what, like everything is fine, but everything is kind of falling apart. And you said, write down what you want. Don't write down what you don't want. Just write down what you want and then go play, right? And yes, and you always say you have your kid in your belly and you have your adult in your throat. And you said, once you know what you want, look at the list and then let it go and just play. And I did that, and I went to museums and I went hiking every day, and I really intentionally set up my life. And 2 months later, I'm in my dream role with my dream team, close to what I wrote down, right? But it's we always call it like woo-woo spirituality, but it's so much more than that, right? There's so much science in that, which you cover in your book.
Right. And I think it's just about the way you feel until that job comes as well, right? So like, I think there's this, if we focus on the negative constantly, we think somehow that's like creating a new situation, but that's just making you feel like shit. And then you're attracting those conversations with other people who have the same things you get into that detailed negative. But it's like those things have inspired, like you've gotten a lot of clarity from your last role of what you actually wanted. So we need to let that inspire a new desire and then focus on the ideal that you now have like uncovered.
Yeah. And there's always, I think, well, for me anyways, there's a lot of guilt and shame sometimes with that, because once I realize that I'm in a position that I don't want to be in, right? So when you call it the scale, right, 0 to 10, then I'm like, well, crap, I'm feeling this way. How did I even get here? And there's this sort of
So there's your dialogue, and that's your dialogue piece, right? So then you're like, this is my fault. I shouldn't have done this. I could have done this differently, and all of that I justify, but it's not helpful, So like, I think this is my big thing right now. There's a Martha Beck process that she does where she sits the heartsick version of herself across from the table. So I like to think about this in dialogue, right? So like at the time you'd have this heartsick version of yourself who like is not enjoying your job, but then also feeling guilty about how you ended up there or whatever. You sit them across from your dime self, your like confident, compassionate, curious self. So like, I love the imagery of like really sitting across from yourself, and you let that heartsick version talk, I feel terrible and I should have done this. And now I'm stuck or whatever. Like you let them talk and you let them say everything that they need to say. And then you imagine what this dime like version of yourself would say to that person. In the most compassionate way, you would be like, sweetheart, I love to like use a word, like a kind baby girl, like this happens. You are learning so much. You couldn't have known it was going to be like this. And I know that it's challenging and you have a bit of perfectionism and you want things to work out the way that you want them. And you expect people to behave in a certain way or whatever, like saying all that to yourself. But you have learned so much and life is long and you can have whatever you want. Let's just decide what it is and go after it. You got this. And I think what your confident, kind self would also say is like, I'm here. Like, come here, I think is kind of the last thing. And Martha Beck always says, then you wrap the heartsick version like a cast, so your confident dime self wraps that version of yourself like a cast. So almost like, come here, so I think then you're soothing yourself from within yourself. Because I think the tendency when you're in that position and it's so uncomfortable, you want to go get all of your other people to support you. And I do think that our friends and family and loved ones can be support, but it's best if they're like a secondary support and not, like you don't need it so badly because you've been able to soothe yourself from within yourself because you've created a compassionate conversation, which is not something that in all of the work I've done one-on-one with people, I have met very few people that are truly naturally compassionate.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you talk to 10 strangers on the street, 9 out of 10 would tell you that they're currently talking negatively to themselves, badly, talking down to themselves, right? The other thing that you touched on reminds me of a quote that I really like, which is something along the lines of like, ships are safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are for, right? So it's all about the skills that you're learning while you're going through something, right? So the 10 would say like, hey, I'm here for you. We're going through this together and we get to learn it together. I have the abilities to figure it out. And that's what emotional capacity is at the end of the day, right? It's focusing on the right thing, getting yourself.
Resilience. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I'm just like focusing on resilience right now because I feel like it's a big topic for people, but it's the idea of like, there has to be a level of suffering to actually initiate resilience. So
Mm.
like, that's why I think people are doing these things now, like cold plunges and tough workouts. Like we need to stimulate a version of discomfort so that we can learn how to, because life is not going to be comfortable. But I think it's about
Yeah.
how some of the most interesting people have had some of the most like suffering situations, So I do think it creates an ability to dig deep in yourself, And the other thing I was thinking when you said that, asking 10 strangers on the street, I think it's just a new thing too. So I'm all about self-awareness and self-regulation. So like the scale is a way to become self-aware of where you're at. And then the
Mm.
BFD is a way to regulate yourself from within yourself, But when
Wow.
you say 10 people on the street, I would say maybe 5 of them aren't even self-aware to know what their dialogue is. So I think that's
Mm.
also like I've had some clients like, I don't speak to myself. And I'm like, you definitely do, like there's no way.
They don't speak to themselves at all?
Wish that was the case for me, but there's this constant, you know, couple people in there.
I heard that before, that some people like there are some people that have this internal dialogue with themselves all day. I'm one of those people, always have been. And then there are others that do not have that, which is fine and great. But I'm like, what happens? Like, what do you
I
think?
don't know what you would like. You just sit there and just like, you just watch a show and like, just watch a show. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Like there's not a conversation. There's not like a little person in there. Like what's happening? How funny. But yeah, that changes it, right? Because you have to want to be self-aware, right? You have to know that you can be mindful and figure out like this is where I am right now, and all to know that you can go somewhere else and change your circumstances, right? So not being the victim of what's happening around you, the conditions that are there. Does that ever come hard for you though? Because like as a coach, as a professional, even, I mean, you've been doing this for so many years, right? In Costa Rica and New York, and you've worked with sports teams and celebrities and like Fortune 500 companies now, CEOs. Like, is that easy for you now?
like I'm very aware of what's happening in my brain, which I would also say is like a blessing and a curse, because there's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes where like things are going well and you're so aware that you're kind of a creative component in that not going well. So then there's like a double-edged
Yeah.
sword where like you don't feel good, you're creating that you don't feel good. And again, I think the answer to that is more compassion. So I love
Mm.
it. Like, even I was going into kind of like an interview the other day and I like had to sit myself in front of myself and be like, what does my calm, confident self say to that person? Like, take a breath. What is meant to happen will happen. Like, let's just see how
Mm.
this goes. We want it to be a win-win for everybody. There's nothing that you need to do or be, just go in and be yourself. So all of it is just a version of being self-aware. And then I think the next step, I work with a lot of, middle school students right now. And I think there is a push in the younger generation to be more aware.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think there's also a tendency to be really identified with certain emotions that we feel. So I'm
Yeah.
really big on the awareness of where you're feeling, but also knowing that those emotions, they change constantly and sometimes without reason. So it's just like to realize that, yes, I may feel like this, but I could feel differently in 2 minutes. And I have a lot of tools that will shift that at any time. So I'm always in the driver's seat.
Love that. So I'm thinking right now about the people that are listening to this and they're like, yeah, okay, great, Jill. Thanks so much. I know I care about myself. I know that I'm being compassionate about myself, but my company doesn't care about me. My boss doesn't care. He just cares that I'm selling enough product. What would you say to them? What tools would you give to them?
My first things I would say is like when they're saying that, I would ask them what channel they're on, would be the first thing.
Mm.
Because I do think like it's kind of like, so the idea is like when I'm at a 3 or a 4, I'm kind of anxious. So like whatever thoughts I have on that energy level or capacity level are going to tend to have those types of emotions involved. So like if I'm kind of in a shamey, blamey mode, I always say that's pretty much below a 5. So like right
Mm.
away, if I'm having that kind of conversation, I would probably say, go for a walk and drink a glass of water and see how you feel, so
Yeah.
but something about just like, because I think on a high channel, you might say, wow, my company doesn't care for me, but I am such a talented individual and there's lots of opportunities out there for me, right? From a lower channel, I'm just going to complain about it and then complain to my colleague about it and my partner and everyone's going to
Yeah.
want to turn around when they see me coming. So it's like, I think it's
Yeah.
just about noticing what channel you're on and getting yourself on a higher channel and then seeing what you feel about the same situation, right? So like there's an example in the book where I talk about I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. And, when she plays with loud toys, if I have a lot of capacity, I'm singing jingle bells. We're making it fun. I'm getting involved. If I don't have capacity at the moment, it's overstimulating and I'm going to lose it or say something that I don't feel good about or, so what I think about that is it's the same situation. It's the exact same external stimulus, but based on the capacity that I have, I'm going to respond differently to it. So that person you're saying could be in that same environment, but based on the capacity they have, they're going to respond completely differently to it.
Totally. So what if I'm at a 7 and my neighbor's at a 3? Would you recommend that we just don't hang out that day? Or how can somebody adjust themselves to, not me go down or them? I mean, I'm sure from a 3 to a 7, you can't just do that magically, right?
Right. Well, I love this question because I feel like that's kind of the biggest question I get after my talks. I'll do big keynotes somewhere and there'll be every time someone's like, okay, Jill, I'm on a good channel.
But my husband.
Yeah. My husband, my colleagues, my parents, there's always somebody, it's them who's on a bad channel. Right. So I always say there's 2 reasons we end up spending time with people on lower channels. First of all, I also want to preface this by saying back in the day when I lived in Costa Rica, I was just surfing every day. I was running a gym. My biggest problem was at high tide, it is very loud when I'm trying to sleep. I was living so close to the ocean that it was loud, so at that time when I created it, and this was 15 years ago, I would have been you got to be a 10. If you're not a 10, we're not hanging out, deal with your own shit, and then life happens. And then I have a kid by myself in the pandemic and I am not a 10 all the time. So I have to actually rethink this. Right. So first of all, any channel is fine and any channel is not permanent. And we're all going to experience all of them because we're human beings. And that's part of being in this world, So I think the first part is to just, even if I'm the one on the 3, I need to be compassionate with myself about that. But I always say someone on a higher channel might spend more time with people on low channels if they are not on the channel they think they are themselves, or they're expecting that person to be at that channel. So if every time I speak to you, I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go. And I start, I'm not going to be like, good morning. I'm going to be like, even my body's going to change, and I'm going to be like, I'm going to try to match you where you are to create connection. And I'm going to say, how are you today? Right. So I'm going to, and I always say you can't get poor enough to help poor people get money. You can't get sick enough to help sick people feel better. So me going down on that channel is not actually going to help you. So I think it's a reframing of realizing the person on the higher channel has the honor and privilege to be able to see that person, because I think that's it too. That's not who they are. That's not comfortable for them. If someone's complaining all the time, instead of being like, Jesus, we want to be like, actually, wow, that must be so difficult for you, because nobody wants to feel like that or be doing that. Right. So I think it's this idea of seeing them and seeing them, knowing that there is potential for them to be different. Because if, someone always talks to their mom and they're always negative, well, there's no way it's going to stay like that. So then I'm going to go down to their level when I talk to them. I'm going to be expecting that kind of conversation when I, especially with their parents. I feel like as soon as you talk to your friend, you're like, hey, as soon as your parents call, you're like, hi, so it's if you could just even change your voice from the second you got on that call, that would give them room to come up and join you.
Reminds me of the quote that's somebody that's more successful than you will never make fun of you for where you are, right? They're never, because they have empathy. If I want to be a business owner, if I want to, I don't know, make a movie, there are certain steps I have to take. Every single movie maker, every single entrepreneur has gone through those steps and know what that is. And ideally, if they're on that channel, right, they're empathetic and can meet you in some capacity, but not to your level, but bring you up in that way, right? So,
right. Oh, yeah. And I would say the other thing too is what does someone, so we talk about, so at a 10, you're detailed positive, at a 0, you're detailed negative, that's just the tendency. At a 3, we're generally negative, a 5, we're neutral, a 7, we're generally positive. So if someone is kind of at a lower channel and they're kind of getting into detailed negative, I always think to myself as well, even think of yourself when you're in those places. What does someone who's detailed negative want from you? I think the biggest thing is they want to feel heard and understood. But
Yeah.
what we often do from a high channel where you're like, "Ah, this is like," you just like throw a solution, like, well, just do this. And as soon as I throw a solution to someone who's detailed negative, what they're going to think is Jill doesn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And since she doesn't understand, obviously she doesn't understand if she thinks it's that simple, then I'm going to continue to talk about it and get more detailed until
Yeah.
she understands. So I think as the listener on the higher channel, what you want to first do is make sure that that person feels heard and understood.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to take one sentence to reflect back like, wow, I get it. You had a difficult meeting today and that didn't go how you planned. And I bet you're feeling this, this, and this. And they're going to be like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then you can say, then you can start to add some solution from that place of them feeling heard, right? So then you can say, but I know if you keep talking about this, you're only going to feel worse.
Mm-hmm.
So what could we do in the next hour that would make you feel better? So we can start to add things.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is, when you start your self-development, personal development journey, spirituality, whatever, a lot of people are very focused on themselves and like, oh, if I fix myself, then the whole world around me will just adapt and do something
Right. Or
differently.
that's my only problem. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not, because even what you're talking about touches on that two-way communication, that feedback loop, that how, yes, I can do the work on myself, I can make everything happen, but I can still live I'm just gonna call it a miserable life if I have no empathy or I don't even look at somebody else in whatever channel that they are, because that's not awareness, right? That's just being blind.
So like our goal is not to be on a 10 so we can just sit at a 10. Our goal is to be at a 10 so we can positively influence others.
Yes.
So I work with
Yes.
a company called Roy Group. I have to give them a shout out. And they talk about this idea that the conduct of leaders creates a barometer in others, right? So like the conduct that you show up with is actually creating a barometer of how someone else is feeling, So not that we're responsible for how other people feel, but there's ways that we show up that are either going to allow someone to feel seen and heard and understood or allow them to feel unimportant, So it's like just realizing that what creates my conduct, my energy and my capacity is what develops my conduct to be able to show up in a way that can create feelings in the people around me that I'm going to feel good about. Kids playing with a loud toy and I have a snap show, I'm clearly not making her feel very valued, important, safe, So it's like, and again, I do that, right? So I think that's something else that I'm noticing in parenting as well is like, we're supposed to be perfect. And everyone thinks like, I don't think any parent goes to bed thinking that was a perfect parenting day. Like there's always like, I think in everyone, there's not one day that we go to bed thinking that was perfect, right? So again, I think it's also about being compassionate with being a human and being kind to yourself about it and repairing things when you do things that you're not proud of. And but I think it's just about really realizing that the reason my energy is so important is because it is going to create an environment that is going to be felt by the loved ones that I'm interacting with.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's almost like Diming 1.0 was you in Costa Rica, 10 out of 10. Diming 2.0 was right. And then now you're going to this whole other level. I love the evolution that you're able to even see, even from 3-4 years ago when you and I first met, right? Which, I mean, this is what I take with me every single day. The other part that I take with me, pivoting really quick, is your morning routine. And you had said, I think it was like every day you work out, you journal, you like have your coffee and you just kind of hang out. And unless you do all of those things, it doesn't matter how much time they take, you won't talk to another person. And I do that now. I have a killer morning routine that I'm so proud of.
That in 2020, I think I said that in 2020. But this is the thing that I think is funny. So like when I lived in New York, when I was living in New York, when I came to San Francisco, I was living in New York City, and that was my day. I lived on Wall Street. I went to Equinox. I woke up, I meditated, I wrote, I drank coffee, I went to the gym, I got a nice smoothie on my way home. My first client was at 11 and I was living the dream.
That's me.
Yes, I think in your stage of life, that is what you should be doing, right? So there's this idea of those success habits. Those are success habits. So like, especially when I'm like not responsible for any other human beings, literally, then that is what I'm responsible for myself and my energy. And those are my success habits. And I know that's what I need, but now I have a kid who wakes up at God knows what time. And it's not like I could be like, okay, you go do you, and I'm going to go to the gym and do some writing. And, I even try to write for like 2 minutes, and then I've got like crayons on my paper, like it's just like, so like, I think it's interesting too, that in that stage of life, this is again, like 2.0. It's like, now you got like a bigger time crunch.
Yeah.
And you still do it. So it's like this whole philosophy has been stress tested. So like now, there's so many things here. So like when my daughter was like literally like probably shouldn't have been running with her in a stroller. I had her like propped up from all these blankets, like it was literally like she was so little, but I would run slowly, but still I would like run every morning because we were up early. And so then I would listen to my music and I would picture my ideal day. So I'm not able to write it, but I'm still able to like set myself up for the day, and then we end up stopping at this coffee shop on our way home every day. And there were these 3 guys that were like, they've been having coffee for 25 years. They're all retired. And now we see them every single morning. They have become her like grandfathers, so like we have a grandparents' day at our school next week, and they're all coming, which is just like, so
That is the most precious thing I've ever heard.
it's been like, they babysit for me. I'll be like, the drain's clogged, someone's over here, like it's been amazing. But like, interesting that this has become my morning now. And then recently, 2 months ago, I just tore my ACL. So now there's no running happening. So now I've had to kind of pivot again to like, what is our morning routine and how is that working?
Yeah.
So it's just like, I think there's just a constant, again, it's resilience, right? So there's adversity that's going to help create resilience, but I need to have tools. Resilience isn't just about what I do when I feel stressed. It's about how I fill my container so that stress is not going to affect me the same.
Yeah.
What is one thing, I mean, there's so many things that people are taking away from today, but like, what is one thing that you really want to hone in on the listener or somebody that's watching and hearing you right now?
So good. But yeah, I think the idea is that energy matters and energy is your only job. And if you can learn to control and focus and like follow the recipe of body focused dialogue, you will control your capacity and your energy, and that will control your mood, and that will control the lens that you see the world through. I think it's this idea that your job is not to control the external forces and the external situations around us, because that will steal your energy. If we could take all of that energy and focus on body focused dialogue, you would feel differently, right? So all of the things that are feeling difficult right now, you got to ask yourself, what channel am I on first? And let's get energy and then reassess, right? So what I ask my clients to do is to put a BFD alarm in their phone, right? So just an alarm will go off at, I think 3:00 in the afternoon is a good time where you're kind of like, do I need a cookie or another coffee? That's the thing too. Like if you feel like shit, look at your schedule. Like it's like those memes these days. Like I think this is basic stuff when it comes to energy, but those memes where it's like, have you had a glass of water? No. Have you talked to a friend? No. Have you been outside? No. So it's like, I think there's basic things, but if we have no capacity, that's not going to be, so I think that's what I would want people to know as well, is that like, don't do anything on a low channel. Get yourself on a high channel first, and things will feel more effortless, more efficient, more connected, more fun. So it's not about just like, I don't think we have to like get through anything. I think we have to learn how to get ourselves on a higher channel where then that work will feel easier. So if I'm ever at my desk, even like hanging out with my kid, and I feel like, oh, I'm just a bit like whatever, I'll just feel better when she goes to bed. It's like, no, I need to do something now so that the time until she goes to bed is more connected, right? So there's just always something I can do. And I just think there's never a time to sit on a low channel and make an excuse about it. Because you have the power to change it. So just like, again, it's a constant self-awareness and self-regulation. Where am I and what do I need? And then just creating a standard for yourself that I can be at my best on a regular basis, So I think that would be that energy is your only job, focusing on that and making sure that when I'm doing, especially things that are very important, making sure that I'm on the best channel possible.
Wow. When are you getting your own talk show?
I would love it. I think we should do it together. I think,
honestly,
what do you guys think? Listeners, let us know. We call it dying time.
Stop. Can we please? Because, want us to do a workshop, a retreat for 2-3 days in LA. I'm saying it out loud now, so we're going to make it happen. But I think that we would change a lot of lives. Petting llamas. I love it. How can people connect with you and how can they work with you?
So my Instagram is B_A_dime. My website is jillpayne.ca. I'm sure you'll put it all in the notes. I have a book, Be a Dime. It's in Barnes and Noble and Amazon and Indigo. Also, I do one-on-one coaching and I work with companies. So I like to, when I work one-on-one with people, I like them to have a support system. So it's very rare that I'll do like a one-off. So now I kind of have like a 2-4 deal. So it's like two people can do it together for a special price. So, I mean, reach out to me and we can talk about that. But I think that's the best. So right now I'm working with like a group that there's 3 sisters or a husband and wife or, chief of staff and CEO together. Like, I think it's really important to do it with someone that you're communicating with on a regular basis so that you guys can keep each other accountable.
Love that.
And how do you live your life joyfully?
How do I live my life joyfully? I realize that I always have a choice. I realize that I always have a choice, and regardless of what's happening around me, I want to stir up that energy inside me and just engage fully with.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time, for giving us the tools that we need to really take control of our life and just be mindful and assess where we are and then get and feel better. I'll definitely put everything into the show notes. Everything you could hear that you just said, you can put on a t-shirt. So I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say.
Let's make a really big t-shirt. I love that.
Huge.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you next time.